Okay, great. Hello everyone, good morning. I am Kayuri Hazanis, the Secretary of Federation of India Community Association of Northeast Ohio, FICA. On behalf of FICA, thank you so much for joining in on this lovely Saturday morning for an interview with our uber talented Priyanka Shetty. So it's an absolute pleasure that I introduced Priyanka Shetty for the interview. She's a director, she's an actor, she's a playwright, and I have so many questions about her wonderful work that she's done in and around the country. And we'll just get to that for in a couple of minutes. But just a heads up, we are featuring Priyanka's play, The Elephant in the Room, at the Cleveland Public Theater. We have already completed two super successful shows, and we have still two more shows today and tomorrow. We have put up the link in the chat box, and as a person who has watched it firsthand, it is a wonderful show, intuitive, insightful, and an absolute must to watch, especially in these difficult times. So if you haven't, please book your tickets and go watch it right now. So Priyanka, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this for us. And I would like to start off because I have watched the show. I would like to understand your journey as an artist. So I want to go back to the time when you were in India, when you were a software engineer. And I think you're like, when you even tell in the play that you had a nice job as a software engineer in Infosys, and you're still working on your creative side. So can you please tell us more about like your artistic endeavors back then and your journey? How did it start?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I was employed as a software engineer right after I, graduated out of college. So I was in Infosys in Bangalore, and I'd not done theater outside of maybe a school production maybe when I was 13. And I never thought that I would ever, it was never on my radar that I would take up acting or I would take up theater in general. But I remember reading a novel by Tagore called Chokher Bali, and I just picked it up off of a bookstore in on our campus, and I was so enamored by that story, and I was so enamored by this one character in that play that I could only imagine it being performed on stage. Um, so for some reason, I ended up writing a stage adaptation of it, and I approached other, techies in my company to join me, to rehearse this play. And every time I'm walking around, I'd see, this person would be great for this character, and I would just approach them. Before I knew it, I had this whole team of techies who, like me, probably had an artistic sort of bent of mind and wanted to do something creative. So every day during lunch breaks and after office hours, we would rehearse, and we did it for a year. And all of this without knowing when or where we were going to perform it. We were just getting ready with this play. And a couple of maybe a year ago, I had seen Infosys, they'd brought in Rajat Kapoor and Sharnaz Patel to do a play called Love Letters, and it was so beautiful. It was just a two-person show, and they, held the entire evening. They held our attention, and it was beautifully done. And I knew that they did these employee engagement events for all the employees. So I approached the HR person who brought in these outside artists, and I said, "What if we had our own in-house theater group and what if you put up shows performed by us?" And initially she was like, "Okay," she can't outright say no, right? So she's like, "Okay, let me come see one of your rehearsals." And she told me later that apparently she had only planned to see maybe 2 minutes of it and say something like, "Yeah, it's good, but it's not going to work out." But she ended up watching the whole thing. At the end of it, she was like, "Let's talk budgets." And Infosys actually funded our first play ever, and we did Chokher Bali, and it was a packed audience of 2,500 people. That was my first audience ever. And I played the role of Binodini in Chokher Ballet, and I also directed the play, and it was fabulous. And you know how they have these discussion boards on in
Mhm,
companies, like it was called Infi BB, Infi
mhm,
Bulletin Board,
mhm,
and somebody made a chart of the most popular topics that people spoke about that year. And Chokher Bali was the number one
mhm,
topic of discussion. So it was a huge hit, and they continued funding, our work. Like we did My Fair Lady after that, and again, they tripled our budget. So that's where it started in the unlikeliest of places, and ended up touring that show, and I got noticed by another director in
mhm,
Bangalore. She put me in her musical, Fiddler on the Roof, and that's how it started, really.
mhm,
And at some point, I realized that the thrill that I got when I was on stage was not something I got doing anything else.
yeah,
And I knew that IT just was not lighting the fire in me. So I was Googling, MBA programs to sort of
mhm,
maybe get out
yeah,
of
yeah,
a very technical field and
mhm,
maybe go into something more creative. And a colleague just randomly passed by my cubicle, and she looks
mhm,
at my screen and she says, "Why don't you do a master's in theater?" And I didn't even know such a thing
yeah,
existed, but and then I Googled it and I saw what an MFA
mhm,
program was. And then I saw various universities offering that in the US.
mhm.
And that's basically where it all started.
Oh, wow. And so I was actually about to ask you, like, when was your creative side became a career choice from you? I think you
Yeah.
answered that already.
Yeah.
But how was the situation then back home when
Mm.
you decided that, okay, now I am going to quit and I am going to just go off and start my career as a theater artist, or I really
Yeah.
want to pursue this. How were the reactions? How did you handle all that?
Once I had taken my parents to see a play by another friend of mine. I wasn't
Mm-hmm,
in that play.
mm-hmm,
And again, I was so fascinated by the idea of plays and being on stage. And I just jokingly said, you know what, someday I'd like to do a play. And my mom
right.
immediately told me, don't even
Mm-hmm.
think about it,
Oh my
right?
God.
Like, she's like,
Yeah,
no
yeah,
way, you are
yeah.
not going on
Mm-hmm.
stage.
Mm-hmm.
Because she had a very specific idea of what it was
Right.
to be, I guess,
Yeah.
stage actor or an actor in general. And that was not a positive one. So she's like, no way. So I
Yeah.
knew for a fact that if I asked for permission, I would not get it. So I was like, okay, if I want to do this, I just have to do it,
Yeah.
in a sneaky way. So I
Right.
didn't tell them
Mm-hmm.
that I was doing a play, right? So because it was at my workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, I was
Yeah.
working, right? So I ended up never telling my parents that I was doing a show,
Mm-hmm.
and they never knew that,
Mm-hmm.
our show had been so successful. And then there were articles that started appearing in newspapers about, especially when we did My Fair Lady,
Mm-hmm.
and it started becoming harder to hide
Right.
from
Yeah.
them. So there was one day when I told them, hey, listen, I am in a play and
Mm-hmm.
I would like for you to come see it. And initially, they were all like quite upset and, all of that, but they were like, okay, fine, we'll come see it. I will support you. And it was a 50-member ensemble of,
Mm-hmm.
for My Fair Lady, live singing, dancing, dialects, British dialects, a whole full-blown musical. And they came to see it. I think it was Christ University in Bangalore that had hosted it. So my whole family came, my mom, my dad, and my brother. They loved it.
Yeah.
But immediately after the show, my mom said, this is the last play you're ever doing,
Oh my God.
because she knew that this is like, if she gets into this is all she'll do, and she didn't want that for me. So at that point, it crushed me. But yeah, there was a phase of rebellion and my saying, you saw that a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
that in the play,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this is what I want to do. This is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna do. And so there was a lot of pushback in the beginning, and they were obviously worried that I was giving up a field that I could do really well in,
Right.
and could, financially, that would work out really well for me.
Right.
and then take on something even my undergrad at that point was in computer science, right? So their, I guess, mindset was, why did we invest, in that, in such a good
Mhm.
education if you were gonna just
Mhm.
pursue the arts, right? So initially it was hard, and even now, like it's a little more skeptical. Every now and then they'll say, "Oh, are there any good IT jobs in Philly or things like that?" So we'll see, but definitely they're a lot more supportive now. They're proud of what I've accomplished, and yeah, I hope someday it'll be a more wholehearted sort of support.
I hope the same for you. Honestly, I
Thank
do
you.
with all my heart. So, just a fun question, okay?
Mhm.
So, ever think of actually pursuing a Bollywood career since you are already doing all these shows in India
Yeah,
and were like you were actually like a theater artist in India as well.
yeah.
So, why not Bollywood and why US? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I guess it's just that the opportunity presented itself in the
Right.
US. I'm a
Right.
total Bollywood person. You saw me
I
singing and
know
dancing Bollywood songs in the play. I
completely.
grew up watching so many Bollywood movies. Oh my God, like some of the most unknown movies I would have, seen. I was obsessed. Of course, I'd love to do it someday. But again, like I think it's a particular career path, right? Like if I
Yeah.
wanted to pursue that, then there are a specific set of things that I needed to do. And
Okay.
I don't know, if the
Yeah,
opportunity presents itself, I am not
of
averse
course.
at all. But there is something about creating original work, which in
Mhm.
addition to acting is really feeding that fire
Right.
within, which is to write stories that I'm passionate about and
Absolutely.
perform in them. So that's sort of become my career path now, where I not only feature in works, but I also create them.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that
Yeah.
because I can then, the projects that I'm a part of, then are projects I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
So, what I would really love to also explore is, try this out in different mediums. In
Mhm.
addition to theater, maybe
Yeah.
in film and TV, creating an original show or writing a screenplay or a feature, things like that. So, but yeah, like Bollywood, that also requires following a specific path and doing
Absolutely.
a specific bunch of things
Mhm.
in that particular career path. So I think I've reached a pivotal point now where if I want to diversify, then the time is now. Then I need to really invest
Yeah.
that time and energy in that direction.
Mhm. Absolutely. And we are glad that we have you over here in US where we can see you firsthand and not in Bollywood. So let's talk about that transition period when you came into US, where you studied at the university. So what was that experience like when you were doing your master's here in theaters in West Virginia?
Mm,
And what led, I think that is where you started your first play of the elephant in the room
yeah.
was right in your university. So let's talk about a little bit of your journey here in the university and what led to actually the generation of the elephant in the room. Like what led to the generation of the play.
Absolutely. So yeah, I got into University of Virginia, which is in
Mhm.
Charlottesville, Virginia, and I was the first Indian grad student ever in that program that had existed for decades. And so it was a matter of pride for me because, they bring in 8 students every 3 years. It's
Right,
a fully funded program, so, you don't have to take on a student loan or
right.
anything of that sort. It's not a financial risk.
Mhm.
You get paid because you also teach as a part of your, time there. So it was a really sweet gig. So I was very excited when I first got accepted into it. And what nobody knew was that was my first acting class ever. And I was studying with people who had either grown up taking acting lessons or had a
Right.
BFA, degree in acting, and those were my peers. So definitely a little bit of imposter syndrome
Mhm.
going in. But one of the things that my professors told me early on was, you may think that you don't have the training, but you are exactly where you need to be for a master's program, that you have an innate understanding of it, of theater. And, that's why you got selected and chosen. So I came in with really big hopes, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
Mm.
And I really looked up to each of those professors as mentors, really. And I had envisioned that these 3 years, so an MFA is a terminal degree, just like a PhD is, like there's
Mhm.
no, so another good thing out of doing an MFA was you could teach at a university level. After that, you
Right.
could be a professor at a university. So it was everything was wonderful.
Mhm.
And how I'd envisioned the 3 years would go was I would engage in intense training. I would get many, as all of us would get
Yeah.
many opportunities to practice our craft, and it would be a life-changing experience. And the training was good. I learned a lot by teaching. Honestly,
Mhm.
quite a bit. I really enjoyed teaching the acting classes, and sometimes that when you teach someone
Yeah.
how to do something, you become better at it. So I was really close to all of my students across those 3 years, and that's one of the things that I really enjoyed. But I noticed that when it came to anything outside of what we were doing in classes, that's when I would see a gap in how I was perceived and how my talents were perceived. Anything that we were doing or exploring in class, they were all praised. My grades were amazing all the time. But then when it came to casting in a department production,
Yeah.
they would have to squeeze me into some bit parts because they could never envision me playing a character that was of any substance. And I would end up getting stuck in roles that were either completely not right for my heritage, and or they would yeah, they would find they had very specific ideas or stereotypical ideas of what an Indian person could be. So I would get cast as the maid or the scientist or, very specific things. And I started noticing a pattern. And there was one year, spoiler for those who haven't seen, or maybe I shouldn't tell this. There was one year where something even worse happened.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? So that's when that was a punch in the gut for me
Right.
because I had experienced these little comments and microaggressions and being left out of opportunities that other students got, even outside of being cast in roles. And when that really rock bottom moment happened for me in grad school was when I wrote The Elephant in
Right.
the Room as an artistic response to it because I didn't have any other means of expressing what I'd been through.
Yeah.
And it was not just expressing what I'd been through in grad school, but also the struggle of what I'd been through back home in even getting to the US and, pursuing something that I was passionate about. So that led to The Elephant in the Room. And yeah, I wrote it in 2017,
Mhm.
performed it for the very first time in 2018, and in 2024, I'm still doing it. So it's still quite relevant.
Of course, of course. And so let's talk about the phrase, the elephant in the room.
Mm.
Like, how did you come up with that? What was that? What was that thinking? What does that phrase meant to you? And how is it showing up in your work? Is what I would like to ask.
Right. I mean, we all know what
Yeah,
the term means, right? That,
right. Of
it's
course.
it's a big issue in the, that everyone's aware of in the room, but no one ever wants to talk about
Yeah,
it or address
right.
it. However, one of the things that I had observed whenever
Mhm.
people spoke to me in America was one, they also always had to bring up India, and they always had to bring up elephants because that's what they'd seen on The Simpsons. And, they really believed that elephants are, how we get to work, or I don't know. It was so outlandish to me. So I wrote that in as a joke.
Mhm.
So we had to write a speech of passionate concern for our voice class. And I'd written this little tongue-in-cheek sort
Mhm.
of speech, which is now one of the scenes in the play, one of the humorous scenes, about how India was perceived and
Yeah.
how that's so different from like who we
Mhm.
really are, right?
Mhm.
So I'd written the elephant in the room as a joke because of the elephant stereotypes that people associate us
Mhm.
with. But then as I dug deeper into, I took that speech, when I hit that rock bottom
Mhm.
during grad school, and I thought, you know what? A lot of these things that I have taken in my stride and um, made humor out of is actually quite deep than what I initially thought it was. Like
Mm,
there is a lot more subliminal messaging that I completely missed. That these were little tiny red flags all along.
mhm,
So the deeper I went into it, I realized that the elephant is in fact a lot bigger,
mhm.
and the metaphorical elephant, I
Yeah,
mean.
of course.
And there were so many facets to it
Mm,
that I think you will appreciate when you see the play. That I then started linking it to the
mm,
actual wonderful animal that the elephant itself is, and how I started
mm,
identifying with it, almost
mm,
like a spirit animal, right? And its strength and its vulnerability, but
mm,
also, you don't mess with an elephant.
mhm.
So all of those beautiful discoveries started making its way into the play,
Yeah.
and it's been a labor of love. It's taken many years to get to the version that it is now, and yeah, I'm excited for more people to see it.
Mhm. And so, referring to the elephant, let's
Mm.
talk about the elephant god that you have in your play.
Yes.
So, one of the areas that you have is an essential part of the play, I would say, are the tarot cards.
Yeah.
So, and it's a really fun part. I really liked how it was like put in the play.
Thank you.
Dude, are you actually like a person who reads tarot cards, or I wonder if they do play a big part in your life as you have shown it in the play?
So I am agnostic, but I've been fascinated by tarot cards just because, like, it's like, ooh, let's do a reading. Tell me about my
Yeah,
future. So in that way, I've been like sort of, it's a fun thing to engage in.
yeah,
Like when I went to, I think New Orleans, I got a reading done because that's what
yeah.
you do when you go to New Orleans. And I've always been fascinated by specifically the Fool card and the
Yeah,
idea of the fool,
right.
that there is something about being foolishly optimistic, or there
Yeah.
is something about um, that I mean, there are different interpretations
Mhm.
of the word fool, but in
Correct.
tarot, the
Yeah.
fool card is actually the strongest. It starts,
Mhm.
it's number zero, I think. Now
Yeah.
that I've done more research about it, I know
Yeah.
that it starts and ends with the fool, that
Correct.
you venture into the unknown without knowing what it is. It's
Yeah.
courageous and foolish, but because
Mhm.
you didn't know something was impossible, so you were able to
Correct.
accomplish it. So I was always fascinated by the idea
Mhm.
of it. I identified with it, and
Yeah.
then I wanted to find a way to combine
Yeah.
the elephant metaphor
With them.
with the metaphor of tarot. And I
Yeah.
was like, ooh, what if we have an elephant themed tarot deck?
Yeah.
But not just any elephant, but the elephant god
My God,
Ganesha.
that's
So,
right.
and what makes theater fun or any storytelling fun is when there's conflict.
Yes.
So putting a tarot deck in the hands of an agnostic person
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
like having this Akashvani sort
Yeah.
of
I know.
moment was fun to me. Like I
Yeah, it
think it
was.
lends
Yeah.
itself to the humor of it too, a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being something profound in the
Yeah.
character's journey.
Yeah.
So that's the way that Elephant Tarot made its way into the deck, specifically Ganesha. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the play, so when I was watching the play, the thing that fascinated me the most
Mm.
was when you play like a lot of roles, especially that of your family members.
Yeah.
So, considering the journey that we have talked so far
Mm.
about your transition from India to US, your dynamics with your family, I can only imagine like the emotions that you go through on an everyday basis when you play those parts. So, can you share like what that experience is like, maybe the first time that you played it, like what went through your head, because I
Yeah.
noticed that you actually got emotional in scenes,
Yeah.
especially when it was related to your brother.
Yeah.
So would you like to like just open up a little bit
Absolutely.
about that?
I remember the very first time, it was in, I think, July 2018 that I was
Mhm.
performing. I was in rehearsals
Yeah.
for the play. I'd written it. I'd written
Yeah.
these scenes featuring, my family members,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
felt immense guilt.
Yeah.
I felt there's still time. You can still
Yeah.
cut out the scene from the play.
Mhm.
But there, for me at that point was, if I'm writing about my experiences in America,
Mhm.
honestly, then I have to write about my experiences in India, honestly,
Mhm.
because a lot of the things that make its way into everyday family dynamics are deeper
Mhm.
societal issues that,
Okay.
a lot of us have in common. Every time I perform that scene with my brother, I hear a lot of sniffles in the audience, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
somebody else has been through something
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah.
And, that's the reason why they're responding in
Mhm.
that way. So in terms of playing it, so I teach a class on solo performance, and I always
Mhm.
tell other students who are writing
Mhm.
autobiographical stories that uh, I remind them of the phrase scars and not scabs. So we
Mhm.
write about and we perform things that we've already healed from,
Mhm.
right? So we're writing about scars. But
Mhm.
if we are writing about something that a wound that is still fresh, then it's like picking at it every time you perform it over and over again, and that's not healthy.
Yeah.
So most of these things that I've incorporated in the play are things I've already healed from.
Right.
So, I mean, they still
Of course.
hurt, but and they still make me emotional, but it's not coming at the personal cost of living through
Mhm.
something traumatic or
Mhm.
anything like
Mhm.
that, right? So it's still operating from a place of, okay,
Mhm.
I can healthily dive into this stuff and experience the emotions and then come out of it. Yeah, okay. So that's I mean, and a lot of these things, especially with family, are so close to my heart, and it's things that I've grown up with and lived with, and so many memories associated with
Mhm.
childhood. And a part of it is also like a little bit of sad mourning of the loss of some of the innocence of those times, right? So yeah, it does get me quite emotional, and but
Mhm.
I think it is the family, um, the scenes with my family that really stick with people more than anything else in the play, because that's what they all,
Yeah.
even if they're not Indian, that's what they all identify
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Enough of the emotional end. Let's switch on to a little bit more fun part. So, so if I may ask, you have done 150 odd um,
Yeah.
acts of this play. So, what has been your most rewarding performance, like throughout when you played it? Well, is there any one specific story that you want to share where you felt, oh, proud that, oh my God, this was such an amazing act today, and I absolutely enjoyed doing it?
I mean, there have been several
Mhm.
performances. Last night was one of them where it was just, when things just click in place
Yeah,
and you're just riding a wave and it's so much
yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah.
But one specific one that comes to mind is, so it was November 2019. I remember
Mhm.
it was my first performance in DC. It was a big
Mhm.
deal for me because it was at the Kennedy Center, which was huge for me as an artist. And not only was it a live performance, it was
Mhm.
also being live streamed. So people
Wow.
from my friends from India, and they could all tune in and watch the
Right,
live stream.
right.
So I remember being very nervous because I thought nobody would show up because I knew
Mhm.
nobody in DC.
Mhm.
But also it was a Kennedy Center, so I was like, they'll have their marketing and some people will show up. So, and I'd been to previous, it was a Millennium Stage
Mhm.
series, and I'd been to previous iterations of that, and there were about 150, 200 people.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, at least I'll get 50.
Yeah.
And you won't believe it. When I went up on stage, there were people everywhere. So they had 400 seats laid out, which we thought maybe 50 would be filled.
Okay.
Every single seat was taken. People were standing behind the chairs. People were seated on the staircase leading from that floor to the next floor. They were on the aisles, they were on the sides. The entire South Asian community in DC showed up because that's what it meant to them to
Mhm.
have their story represented on stage. And of course, there were other audience members too who were not South Asian, but I remember, I mean, usually after my performances, we have some sort of an event or a
Mhm.
post-show
Mhm.
discussion, or I go
Mhm.
out and I talk to the audience or something like that, right? But Kennedy Center had this thing that, okay, 60 minutes and then you're done, the show's done, and then you have to leave.
Mhm.
So I remember after I finished the performance, the audience was like either so shaken by the whole thing that they just sat there expecting that we would talk about it and unpack it, and I had to like awkwardly sort of walk away. But I remember everyone, okay, once they realized that, okay, that's it, like the show's done, we have to go home now. A lot of people coming up to me and talking to me, and there was this one lady, she was like, I live right across the street, why don't you come over for dinner? Which was so sweet. She's like, no, just I live right across the street. Come over, we'll have dinner, we'll talk. But I just, that day was powerful because I think
Yeah.
I realized even though this was a very specific story about my life and what I've been through, there's a universality to it that a lot of people connect with. I had friends attend that show, and they said they were sitting next to a mother and a daughter who were also Indian,
Mhm.
and that they were in tears and had a long conversation after that because that scene with my mom really resonated with them and they were going through something similar. So that's when I realized that the impact of the story is bigger than what I had originally thought. And it was important to share it with as many people as possible.
Priyanka, I must tell you, you're such an amazing storyteller. Even when you're telling me that Kennedy Center story, I had literally goosebumps when you told me that the entire, like the entire auditorium was packed.
Something.
I swear I had goosebumps. You're such an amazing storyteller.
Thank you.
Okay. So another thing. So we talked about how everything went well and how important it is to go or everything to go well on stage. Was there any time, because you've done so many shows, and on stage mishap? Like, do you have a story about that?
That you have some really great questions, my God. There was a time when the costume that I had to get into at the end of the show
Mhm. Mhm.
would either get stuck, and I have this joke about wardrobe malfunctions, and it was true that I actually did have a wardrobe malfunction. I had to step out in the end with half of it sticking inside. So there's been that. One of the shows, like the chair in
Mhm.
the center of the stage, the one of the legs broke, and the chair was wonky the whole time. And then I sat on it, and it sort of fell apart. But I obviously continued
Yeah.
performing, and people thought it was part of the show. I've tripped and fallen on stage, especially in the last moment. So lots of things have gone on, but I think one of the things that you get really good at as you perform more is take those and make it a part of the
I know.
play.
That's
I remember
absolutely.
especially with the one time that I slipped and fell on stage, I looked at the elephant and said, "Look at what you did. Look at the things you make me do." And people thought it was an actual part of the show. So
Oh,
all's well
wow.
that ends well.
Wow. So, you have always mentioned that this is like an autobiographical play.
Mhm.
I am obviously very much impressed with the way that you have made these things happen for yourself back you even when you're in India, when how you created your life here.
Mhm.
And you have said that you have been, of course, now you have been through various states where you actually lived in how this story happened during within the states. Has that outsider feeling or that elephant feeling ever different in any like location wise? Does it ever go? Did you have any different experience, or is it like because you're performing all over US? How
Yeah.
does that ever change? Is what I wanted to ask.
Sadly, no. And I've been trying to figure out why,
Yeah.
but I've had trouble finding a sense of belonging in
Hmm.
general. Um, and this is true, like even when, you go to a university and you're like, yeah, I'm from this university, go Who's, or, whatever. I never felt that. And it's not just because of my experiences at UVA. It was from the very beginning. I've always felt like an outsider. When I'm in I don't know. Maybe it's someone once said that Priyanka, maybe you're a citizen of the world. You belong everywhere. So I'm trying to figure out why. Of course, I have moments of finding community, being in community, and finding that acceptance. Like, for example, the last few days when we've all met and gathered, and I definitely feel a sense of belonging and love. But there is still that innate feeling of kind of like, again, going back to tarot, there's a card
Yeah.
called the Hermit. like feeling like a hermit, that at the end of all that, I still feel like
Mhm.
I'm yeah, a bubble,
Yeah.
just or a leaf, in the wind of sorts. So yeah, that feeling has never gone away, and I don't know if it will. I hope it does at some point, but as of now, the answer is no.
Yeah. And so, if there was one thing that you wish more people understood
Mm.
about like being outsiders or being this
Mhm.
elephants, as we call them, so one thing that we are ignoring or just letting go in our everyday lives, what would that message be, or what would you want to tell people?
I think especially now that the idea of the outsider has become
Mhm.
even more um, present than
Yeah,
ever before. At least it feels that way, that, oh, you're not from here. Stop
yeah.
letting other people into our
Mhm.
countries. And,
Mhm.
it's just that it takes immense courage to leave your
Yeah,
home and come
yeah.
to a different country and build a life somewhere. And it takes a huge amount of sacrifice.
Mhm.
It takes crossing several hurdles that you can't even
Mhm.
imagine.
Absolutely.
We know, a part of the South Asian community, how immigration is such a topic of discussion
Yeah.
all the time. Of course, a lot of us have, made it to the other side and are now
Mhm.
citizens and all that. And maybe it was a little easier a couple of years ago. But a lot of youngsters who are coming in on their student visas and who are looking, H-1B is such a big topic of discussion all the
Mhm.
time. So there's a lot of uncertainty around um, becoming immigrants or becoming I mean, and that the term non-resident aliens
Mhm.
is so demeaning. And to face more backlash in addition to, it's already like an insurmountable wall ahead
Mhm.
of us. Nothing is guaranteed, right? I think a little bit of understanding would go a long way. Maybe a little bit of effort in understanding the complexities of what it
Mhm.
takes to be an
Mhm.
immigrant in the United States and why we do it despite all the
Yeah,
odds.
yeah.
And that, most immigrants are really hardworking people and contribute to the economy or contribute to these fields in really big ways. So trivializing that is not good, and a little more understanding in that
Mhm.
direction, I think, would make life easier for a lot of us.
Absolutely. And with that, because I want to lead it with the topic, let's talk about your upcoming project. I know you briefly mentioned it on Thursday when we met, but I know that you have an excited new play coming up, which is on a very similar related topic, is what I would like, what I understand.
Yeah.
And it's upcoming in March next year. So can you share some details? What is it about? What inspired you to write it? And basically just what's it all about?
Yeah, so the next project that I'm premiering in March 2025 in
Mhm.
Washington, D.C. is called #Charlottesville. So if you
Mhm.
remember, Charlottesville is the town, the university town that I was
Mhm.
staying in when I was pursuing my master's at
Mhm.
University of Virginia. And in 2017, during my second year in my program, is when a really violent rally happened in
Mhm.
Charlottesville because they were taking down some Confederate statues, and there were these really extreme
Mhm.
far right groups that came into town and
Yeah.
um, engaged in a lot of violence. There was a
Mhm.
young 21-year-old man from Ohio
Mhm.
who ran over a group of peaceful counter protesters with his car and killed a 32-year-old woman, Heather Heyer. So I remember at that point being a student and feeling like
Mhm.
somebody needs to write a play about this because this is like some really scary times. Like this could escalate into, I mean, this is just one incident, right, in the US. And then we saw what happened on January 6th. It
Yeah.
was a reiteration. Every time you talk about January 6th, Charlottesville comes up
Mhm.
as a topic of discussion, that this is not ending here. This is the
Mhm.
beginning of something. So we need more art
Absolutely.
to create awareness about the rise of, white nationalism and white
Mhm.
supremacy
Mhm.
in the US. So I honestly was waiting for somebody else to write a play about it because
Mhm.
I didn't see how I could ever,
Mhm.
being an immigrant from a different country, like I always thought I was not the right person
Mhm.
to Excited. And then we had a guest artist come in who spoke about who was the playwright of the Laramie Project, and he
Mhm,
spoke about how he and his team of playwrights went into Laramie, Wyoming, interviewed people who lived there,
mhm,
and
mhm,
created a play verbatim from those interviews. And that made sense to me. Like, if the words were not mine, but I was only the medium of, if I was the interviewer talking to these local
mhm,
residents,
mhm.
and if I created a play out of that, then I could see somebody like me writing
Yeah.
it. So that's
Mhm,
how it started. So I interviewed about 100 people in
mhm,
Charlottesville who were either present as counter protesters or were in some way impacted by it. I interviewed Heather Heyer's mom. And then, just like Elephant in the Room has had various
mhm,
iterations, initially it was just constructed from those interviews. Then I started looking into the court transcripts and incorporated that. I incorporated news reports. I
mhm,
incorporated, public figures who had to say something about it. And it ended up becoming this really dynamic piece
mhm,
about what happened in Charlottesville and how it
mhm,
was rooted in some deeper historical truths in America. And it put my own experience in perspective too.
absolutely.
So even though initially I thought my own journey had nothing to do with it,
Mhm,
now even that has become a through line in the play. So you will get to see the continuation of what you already saw in Elephant in the Room,
mhm,
as that character that you met in Elephant in the
mhm,
Room, going on this quest to understand why is it that things panned out that way with herself,
mhm.
and why things panned out that way in Charlottesville. So it's a
Absolutely.
little more serious and
Mhm,
political piece,
mhm.
but I do think it's the need of the hour, and I really hope I can bring it to Cleveland too at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like we said on Thursday, right? We would love to have that show here in Cleveland.
Yeah, that would be
So,
lovely.
yep. And with that, I think I'm almost done with my questions. I know we have Monaji here. Monaji, do you have any questions for Priyanka? Do you want to, like, if you want to have, if you want to have a comment, want to talk to her, say hi? I think she's on mute.
Hi, Priyanka.
Hi.
Hi, I'm planning on seeing your show tomorrow. I'm bringing my daughter, grown daughter, is coming
Mhm,
with me.
Oh, yeah.
Some reason I just felt this would be a wonderful experience for a mother and daughter
mhm,
to share.
Mhm.
Um, One question comes to mind is, have you ever thought of having like a production house where you would be the grand dame in, putting together all these, having others
Yeah.
with their experiences and their expertise and their visions,
Mm.
and you're the head of it all, because I see right now, you're finding your way up.
Mm.
Do you see yourself, is that part of your dream or your vision, to be the one on the top overseeing a lot of other stories come to light?
I do hope that, I do want to be in a position where I empower other
Yes.
storytellers of South Asian descent too, because I do
Mhm.
think there's a dearth of South Asian stories, especially on the American stage. There are very few.
Yes. Mhm.
And even when there are playwrights who've written plays on the South Asian experience, it's mostly male dominated. There are very few
Yes.
roles for women.
Yes.
So I don't exactly know how. But it would be really cool if I could put something together where I bring a bunch of creatives and we all make stuff together, or in different mediums, theater, film. But I mean, all of that obviously requires fundings and grants and this and that. So I'm still navigating that world and understanding that world. So yes, if we get some patrons who will, support the cause, why not? But yeah, I do see that in the future, that my trajectory going from merely doing my own artistic work to supporting other artists in creating their work through education, through collaboration and all of that.
Yeah, because I somehow, I don't know, being a mother
Mm,
and a grandmother, I see that potential in you.
thank you.
I see that, and as you said, it's totally male dominated,
Mhm.
and it's time. Uh, the women. I'm not one of those flag carrying, whatever you want to call them. But there is room for women to shine in whatever they want to pursue.
Mhm.
And that's somehow, it's not, it hasn't been explored. And I have a feeling that when I'm very impressed by what you had to say,
Thank
very impressed. um, I think when you have substance, they will listen. They
you.
will listen, and they will. Speaking of the Kennedy Center, that in itself is huge. It's huge. That's a feather in your cap.
Thank you.
So I'm going to see you tomorrow, because I just, that's the only time my daughter can, fit me into her schedule.
No, that's great. It's the final performance. It'll be special.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to it, and I'm extremely, extremely proud,
Thank you.
extremely proud of what you have accomplished. And know that when you are the grand dame, looking down on everyone, there was one person that will not be around, but I'll be rooting for you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Okay,
Thank you so
okay,
much. That means the
okay.
world to me.
And you please come for dinner to my house. Isn't that such an auntie thing to do?
It's so sweet. It's the sweetest thing. And of
Yeah,
course, I would have gone if I could, but
yeah. You meet someone of
yeah.
the second generation, and the first thing you want to do is feed them.
Yes.
Come to my house for dinner.
It's the sweetest thing.
Okay, okay. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow,
See you
Vita.
tomorrow.
Okay. Bye, Carrie. Bye,
But
Deepa. Bye bye.
I think Deepa ji also had a question for you. Deepa ji, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Hi, Priyanka. My question is, what do you inspire or what do you say to women, other women who wants to pursue the same career as you are doing? So can you guide them or can you say something so that like some people may have this interest, but
Yeah,
yeah, they may be scared to venture. So
yeah.
what is the message you give them?
I think the biggest, strongest piece of advice I can give is create your own original work because I see a lot of peers and even the younger generations who are venturing into the arts get really despondent over the fact that that there isn't a place for you, so you kind of have to either blend in or put on a British dialect or I've seen people do all sorts of things to just fit in, and sometimes it's good to stand out. It may not be welcome in the very beginning, but it's refreshing to be a unique person. You don't have to look or sound like everybody else. You don't have to say the same stories as everybody else. You don't have to have the same opinions as everybody else. So finding your own unique voice and creating your own original work, no matter where you are in your career. You could just be starting out. I was just starting out when I wrote this play. And for me, it has become the most empowering thing ever. So, regardless of the medium, it could be writing fiction, it could be writing a scene, a monologue, a play, or whatever it is, a short film. Create something that is original, that is in your voice and that represents you, and create opportunities for yourself and people like you. I think that will take them far.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Priyanka, for doing this. I mean, this was such an amazing experience. I did have watched the play, but even listening to all these stories, it was like really heartrending for me.
Thank
So, any last minute thoughts? Of course, we still have two more shows of The Elephant in the Room going on, and we are going to put in the links. We have it in the chat, but we'll also put it on all social media platforms. So anyone who has not yet watched it, we are urging people to go and watch it because we don't want them to miss out on such an amazing play. So any last minute thoughts before we leave?
Yeah, I just want to invite everyone who's not yet seen the play to come experience it.
Mhm.
Um, Even if you're not a regular theater goer, I think you'll
Yeah.
still have a good time and we'll all hang out after and it'll be fun. So
Yeah.
please come out and spend your weekend with us.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. This was an amazing experience, and we look forward to having you over in Cleveland again next year
Oh,
for
fingers
another
crossed.
play.
That would be lovely.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
All
much. And
right.
this was beautiful questions, very well thought out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Bye.
all.